In this exercise, I'll demonstrate how to voice lead chords on the staff. We'll be voice leading a commonly used chord progression of 1, 5, 6 minor, 4 in the key of C, and those chords are C, G, A minor, and F. At this point, we've learned that the three main tenets of voice leading are to use common tones whenever possible, move the notes in the chord by half or whole step if needed, and also to avoid any leaps or jumps greater than a third. This will ensure smooth motion from chord to chord and will make your voice leading sound eloquent and complex. What I have on the staff here is a C major triad in root position. This chord is made up of 3 voices, so we call this 3-way closed position voice leading. And what that means is there are 3 voices, or 3 parts, in the chord. Closed means that the range from the lowest note in the chord to the highest note isn't greater than an octave. So we're keeping all of our voices in close together for tight harmony. In the bass, we're thinking of the bass as an independent voice, and we're just simply going to put the root note in the bass. This will ground out the sound of each chord. There are lots of ways to approach voice leading. This is just one method that may help you get started. One thing you can do is identify what the notes are in each chord and just write them as letters underneath the staff. So for instance, I know that C is spelled C-E-G, and I've already got that on my staff here. A G chord is spelled G-B-D, so I might just write that up. A minor, A-C-E, and F major, F-A-C. Now I can see how my chords are constructed just by the letter name alone. Go through and put your bass notes in so you can be done with that portion. So I'm going to go ahead and put a G in the bass clef, an A, and an F. I could go either down a third from this A here to the ledger note, or I could pop up to the F. As a general rule, we do not have to voice lead the bass notes. Bass can move around freely as it wishes. Now for the chords. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look for common tones. My first chord is C major, C-E-G. And then I'll look at the next chord, G, B-D. Common tone here is G. So the first thing I'll do is carry over the G. There's my common tone. So my top note doesn't move. That's great. That's going to be a really smooth sound. Then I'll decide where to write the B and where to write the D. So we'll move the E down a step to D, and we'll move the C down a step to B. There's my D, and there's the B. Now you'll see that the G chord, in the right hand at least, is in first inversion. The B is on the bottom, which is the third, then the D, which is the fifth, and the G, which is the root. However, this chord will be heard in root position because the root of the chord is in the bass. And remember that the note we hear in the bass really takes precedence over the sound of the chord. Let's do the next one. So now we're moving from G to A minor, G-B-D to A-C-E. As you can see, there are no common tones here. So I have to figure out the smoothest way to move from G to A minor, preferably moving by half or whole step if possible. So A, I know, is a step above G. C is a step below D, or I could take my D up to E. These are the types of decisions that you have to make. So it makes sense to move the G to the A. It also makes sense to move the D up to the E. And the B then can move up a step to the C. So essentially we're transferring this same voicing here just up a step. That's okay. So here's the A. We've got G moving a step up to A. D is going to move a step up to E. And B will move a step up to C. Now we do have some parallel motion here. That's okay for our contemporary usage. You just want to avoid having long stretches of the same parallel voicings because the listener will eventually become a little bit bored and sort of know what to expect. The last chord we have to do is F. So now we're moving from A minor to F major. So we have A-C-E moving to F-A-C. This is really nice because we see we have 2 common tones. So the first thing you can do is just carry those over. Keep the A where it is, and keep the C where it is. Which means I only have one choice for the F. The E will move up a step to the F. My F chord is in second inversion because the fifth of the chord is on the bottom in the right hand. However, once again, it will be heard in root position because the root of the chord is in the bass. We're simply using chord inversions to help us play smoothly from chord to chord. Your top note sounds like this. G, G, A, A. Motion by step, that's great. The middle voice, E, moving down to D, back up to E, and back up to F. That's fantastic. Again, we're moving by step. And the bottom note, C, moving down to B, back up to C, and then staying the same. If I put all of that together, it sounds like this. Now you can hear the inner voices moving really smoothly. With the bass note, which is the root note of each chord, this is really going to ground out the sound of the progression. I'm going to play the bass note down an octave. If I were to play this same progression using root position chords, it won't sound quite as smooth as what we just did. Notice in that example there's a lot of jumping around, and again, the listener is going to come to expect that the sound of every chord will be the same. When you voice lead, you're varying the sounds of the chords so the listener remains engaged. Now you can see we have a nice smooth progression. All of the notes are moving, no greater than a step, specifically a half step or a whole step. We didn't have any leaps of a third, which makes the motion of the chords sound conjunct. After you practice writing this on the staff, I encourage you to try playing this on the piano.